Flax has been found to grow best in well-structured soils. It doesn't particularly like the light sandy soils. It's not particularly fond of waterlogging. It can stand periods of waterlogging, but doesn't like low-lying, constantly damp soil. It will tolerate acidic soils unless the pH is really low, and it will grow in calcium pHs of 4.5 as long as there is low levels of exchangeable aluminium. It's classified as having a moderate to low tolerance to salinity. It has a small seed, so it requires a weed seed paddock to go into, and it needs good seed soil contact and to be sown quite shallow. You can see here in this time of sowing 3 the effects of sowing too deep. This occurred because this paddock got a little bit wet and we couldn't control the depth. And so you can see from here that the emergence was basically 0 once we began to seed too deep. Flax can be affected by frost at both the seedling stage and the flowering stage, but I understand that it actually tends to have little impact on the final yield that you get. It has a phosphorus requirement that is less than wheat. It has a sulphur requirement that's higher than the cereal grains, but is comparable to your other oil seeds such as canola. When flax was grown in the Boyup Brook, it did respond to additional applications of zinc by improved vigour and by improved yield. The flowers of the flax are self-pollinating. They then form a seed capsule, which is referred to as a boll, which can hold up to 10 individual seeds. It has an indeterminate flowering period, so it'll flower for weeks at a time, and flowering generally stops when it either runs out of moisture or due to environmental conditions. Other insects that can be problems are red-legged earth mites. Particularly just after seeding and during early germination, they can come in and they will completely devastate flax crops. So applying an insecticide prior to seeding or at the time of seeding gives great control of those. Cutworms can also be an issue with young flax crops. So much of the agronomy that we have surrounding flax comes from Canada. In Canada, they have found that flax performs poorly on canola stubbles compared to cereal and other broadleaf crop stubbles, particularly in the presence of volunteer canola seedlings. The lower flax yield may be due to the negative impact canola has on soil abruscular mycorrhiza. Flax has a very high dependency on abruscular mycorrhiza, so significant yield losses can result in low mycorrhiza situations. These mycorrhiza are important in crops such as flax that have a really restricted root system, and basically flax is unable to uptake phosphorus if that mycorrhiza isn't present. It also helps the uptake of other less mobile elements such as copper and zinc as well. Flax is also sensitive to the phytotoxic compounds released from canola stubble and this residue, and this results in reduced flax germination and seedling growth. It will be interesting to see if this is the case in Western Australia, because we have obviously different yields and different stubble densities compared to what they would get in Canada. We have, with a darkened site, has actually been planted onto a canola stubble. So far it has had the least disease issues and it's had the highest emergence counts of all of our flax sites. So it's not sort of stacking up to what they've found out in Canada. Canada research has shown that flax sown on cereal stubbles produces the highest yield, and barley and wheat stubbles give a higher yield than oat stubbles. Legume-wise, the yields are comparable to flax sown on legumes such as peas, comparable to wheat stubbles. It will be interesting to see how we go if we ever seed it after a lupin stubble, because lupin also has a negative impact on soil mycorrhiza. So this may then reflect as a reduced germination and vigour in the flax crops, but that's once again only time will tell. Flax grown on flax is a big no-no because you get rapid soil build-up of pathogens, particularly your fusariums, your pythiums, your rhizoctonias. So you'll get a significant yield reduction if you go flax on flax. Flax is ready to be harvested when the bolls, their branchlets, and at least the top parts of the plants are mature and dry, and the seed rattles in the pod. The moisture content needs to be 9% or less. Harvesting can be a little bit tricky. Harvesters need to be fine-tuned so that they don't damage the flax seed. The outer coating of the flax seed is quite fragile and can be easily damaged, and it's quite easy to blow the whole lot out the back, being a very fine light seed. There's also the issue of the stems being quite fibrous, and they can wrap around the harvester machinery as you are going along. So harvesting wise, crops can be desiccated, they can be swathed, or they can be direct headed, and all the techniques are used. I think, Ray, you have always swathed?
We windrowed ours, and
you windrowed yours?
And it didn't wrap at all in the windrow situation.
Yep.
Same front, believe it or not, and picked up very easily.
Yep. And I think some of it too depends on environmental conditions. If you get a bit of rain or something rather beforehand, it's probably one of those crops that you're going to have to get out and check and see, and if it's not going to go through that day, then wait a few hours and come back to it. The available varieties, there's currently no breeding of flax in Australia. There are 2 commercially available varieties, both of which we have here. They are Croxton and Glenelg. So Glenelg is an early to mid-season maturing variety that was released in the 1970s. That's the white flowering variety that we have there. It's widely grown now in northern New South Wales, and 90% of the flax area grown in northern New South Wales is to Glenelg. It was the standard crop grown in Victoria until the fusarium wilt became such a significant issue. Glenelg has an average oil content of 44.3% and an alpha-linolenic content, which is the omega-3, of 52%. Croxton is the blue flowering variety that's right here in front of me. It was bred in 1985 to replace Glenelg, as it has slightly more resistance to the fusarium wilt. It has a lower seed yield than Glenelg. It's taller and it is a little bit more prone to lodging. However, its average oil content is 45.7% and the alpha-linolenic content is 58%. So it makes up with oil content and oil quality what it actually lacks in yield. Araco is an Argentinian variety. It's only selectively available when grown under contract. It is currently the highest yielding flax in Australia, but the oil content is quite low at 43.1%. There are 2 newer varieties, LM14, which is now called McCubbin, and LM17, which is called Streeton. And these 2 new cultivars are licensed to Osgrains in Moree. Both are blue flowering types, and they do well when seeded early around the canola time of seeding. They are higher grain yielding varieties than both Croxton and Glenelg. So the Streeton has an average oil content of 47.1% and McCubbin of 45.6%, and their alpha-linolenic content is round about the Glenelg Croxton sort of level. So they'd be really interesting varieties to trial here in Western Australia.